Hi, welcome to No More Sex Shame video series. Today we are talking to Galen Fous, sex positive therapist, who is talking a bit about the ways in which sexual shaming around kink and kinky behaviors has impacted him in his practice and his life. Galen, thanks for doing this.
It's a pleasure to be with you, David, and totally aligned with the mission and intent here. So happy to participate.
I appreciate it. It really means a lot to me. I start with one easy question, and maybe not so easy. How has sex shaming sort of been something that you've been dealing with in your personal and professional lives?
Yeah, I think everybody takes it in their own particular way. For me personally, what I noticed when I was reflecting, because I knew you were leading with that question, and I reflected on that I've recognized first my sexuality came alive when I was about 5 years old, well before puberty. I was already having active fantasies and pornographic imagery of women in nylon legs and high heels, and I was turned on, and I was well before any kind of maturity to understand it in a way. But this alive part, I mean, it was kind of had its own maturity, that it was like a separate creature almost that was already operating. And I'm just like, whoa, that's kind of exciting for whatever reason. But I noted that my sexuality was so strong, the shame never touched my sexuality. I was in a Catholic environment, so I had nuns and priests, and I went to a Catholic high school, a Catholic grade school, so I had nuns teaching me there, and I was shamed around sexuality. Sexuality generally was shamed and vilified and of the devil and such. But I always felt strong in my sexual truth, but I was terrified of ever being discovered. That was how the shame affected me, by keeping me so hidden, so guarded, so careful to only look like the kid in the white hat or the altar boy, or, I presented perfectly this contrast to my, edgier sexuality that was continued to evolve. And till by the time I was 13 was when I first became aware of kink. I saw some porn magazines, BDSM magazines, with some really intense imagery on it, which totally turned me on. This was kind of a male dominant, female submissive oriented kink that I was viewing then. And it was, wow, where can I find a girlfriend like this? My response was instantaneously, oh, that seems like right up my alley. But the shame was an overlay of fear and terror of ever being caught. And if I got caught, then the inescapable exposure of, well, I'm cool, but they aren't cool, and this is going to be bad, was an ever prevalent part of my going to my sexuality and then returning, hoping I didn't leave any tracks.
And what about professionally? One of the things that I noticed in your book was that these were some of the issues you talked about around sexual shame that people experience around kink. How did that become part of your kind of clinical work?
Well, it really evolved. Again, everything comes out of my own experience, I think, of how I needed to manage or come to terms with or understand my own sexuality. And then that led me to be able to want and help and support others, because there wasn't much going on out there in terms of, there's a lot of sex therapy around sexual disorders and dysfunctions and everything, but there's not much therapy around how do you embrace this ecstatic, amazing part of your being in a way that you integrate well into the rest of your life. I mean, that should be part of the therapeutic process to support people in approaching this ecstatic part of their sexuality. But so one of the main foundations that I think is important is how the body is involved in when we are shamed, when we are afraid, how it literally restricts. So a common thing, a client will call me for an interview, and their voice, they can barely speak. There's a little part of them choking their throat saying, don't say that. Don't let anybody know, oh, you're disgusting. Oh, that's horrible, kind of thing. So this is a muscular gesture opposing the natural desire to just say, hey, I'd like to get spanked. Instead, it's like, well, sometimes maybe, they just can't say it as you might say any other regular part of your life. Our sexuality is so buried under this fear and terror. So the physical part, I think, is really a strong working place, a strong place to work for people to start. If that's where you feel the tension, start breathing and, getting some massage there, or just help you get over that hump. And then mostly to realize that that's a moment. If you can just get past that threshold of, whoa, you can, you got to create, it's like an initiation. You got to cross that threshold, to get past your fear.
It almost sounds a little bit like the way that we treat phobias, for instance, that, people maintain a phobia because they always run away from or leave this frightening stimulus. And so they never really learn that they can survive it.
Yes.
You're kind of saying the same sort of thing, that our shame leads us to pull back from these feelings or desires. And
right.
We learn to work through that shame, that those feelings kind of go away.
Yeah, or at least they become in your awareness where you can have a choice now to, instead of responding to the way that embedded fear wants to respond, i.e. run away, we can just maybe learn to take a breath and go, wait, that's not what I want. That's my old pattern. My new pattern is, okay, I'm going to lean into this a little bit. I'm going to take a stretch towards what I want. And I know this part of me is still, kind of shaken a bit, but that's where awareness comes in. I think I want to help clients get aware of what's going on internally in them so that they can come back to choice and have the intention. If you have the intention to heal, to be empowered, you're well on your way to getting there. The rest of the work is in develop practices that encourage the intention and diminish what resists the intention. So there's a lot of layers here. So the body's important, understanding the backstory and the whole history and all of those things are all need to be brought into the perspective. And like you said about this idea of the way trauma is almost like flight or flight syndrome, that people get stuck in the one side of that instead of cycling through it. Like I've had clients where I can't be touched. I get they go like that, but they want to be touched. So, we've worked out ways to, okay, can I come in a little closer, move in, until finally they would let me embrace them while they just rattled like that until, they kind of let that become more complete. So they recognize, okay, I can get through that fear, that trauma internally, and start to learn, recode the body, their response along and align it with their intention so that they can get this. But there's so many stories in the head though about shame, like, oh, I'm disgusting, or I'm going to hell, or what if my teacher knew that, or my parents or my family, that's the big psychological layer that is keeps people totally unable to embrace their sexuality. It's so strong sometimes that people will take it to their grave before they would ever tell another person about what their desire looked like. And that's tragic.
Yeah, there was recent research that came out that showed that, the majority of secrets that people keep are around sex, still today. And,
yes.
Like you as a child, keeping the secret of the desires that you would really kind of come to terms with and accepted as part of yourself. But it sounds like you knew that if they become public, you would just experience a lot of painful kind of rejection and judgment.
Yes, and that was inevitably what happened to me. My worst nightmare came true around being busted in my sexuality in a way that I was vilified and became an outcast and was considered an unfit to be a parent, a business partner, a member of the community. I was totally ostracized over a divorce proceeding I was going through, in which at the same time, I was deciding to, get real about my sexuality, and I put an ad on, I think, alt.com or some alternative site like that. And my ex was able to get on my computer and discovered that and turned it into evidence in our trial. And it became, suddenly I was like this child molester, rapist, pathologically sick individual, who was not worthy to be a father or partner, business partner, et cetera. So the courts took that and screwed me totally over in a no-fault divorce state. I was deprived of my parenting rights. A father who had been a dedicated father, coached two kids through all their sports through 7 years. I was the kids' coach. Everybody knew me as the coach because I was always volunteering to coach. And then I was overnight turned into this persona non grata, and my parenting rights were taken away. I could only see my sons every other weekend from 6 p.m. till noon on Sunday, 6 p.m. Friday till noon on Sunday. I could not have any other adults in the habitation with me. All computers needed to be put away in another room. That was the rules for me to see my own children after being a father to them for every day for 15 years.
Shaming by the judicial system.
Yeah, and financial ruin and everything else. It all came down hard. So this was a harsh reality of the shaming that was attempted to put on me. But yeah, I'm stubborn, and I was determined not to go down as a result of that. And also being outed suddenly, it was this huge blessing in terms of I'm not, anybody I had planned to keep this very private in my life. I was going to go find a kinky partner and live the rest of the way I'd always had been. And kink was just going to be a private part. But suddenly I was thrown out into the center, the town square kind of for all to see. And it was suddenly the blessing side of how dark that was. The blessing side was I am out. I don't have to hide. I don't care who knows now. Anybody I would have hid from was known. My ex outed me to all her friends, all my friends, all my business associates, all her family, all my family, and even our two sons. My sons were exposed to this horrendous shit show around who their father was. And then she convinced them not to see me for a year. I got to see him once in a visitation with a psychologist, a therapist, who after I talked to him and tried to have an exchange with my sons to kind of explain to them, hey, Dad's not fucked up, he's not crazy, I do have this particular sexuality, etc. I just tried to be straight up with them and as delicate as I could under the circumstances. I found out later that my ex and the psychologist conferred after the visit. Because she told me, oh, you said it was like this, and oh my God, she was on a rant about what I had said to the psychologist in front of my sons. So this guy totally broke his, bonds of professional morality. And
as a therapist, I mean, what has been the response to your practice and your kind of outness around these issues from your professional colleagues? I mean, here's one therapist who didn't know how to handle it and didn't handle it well. Has that been common?
Well, I tend to move more in circles where it's more accepted, so I don't brush up against that hard edge. But I think like your experience and the work that you do and the advocacy you've done for a certain type of reasonableness or better view or larger view around sexual issues, that the majority still are in the dark ages, I think. And I'm kind of the black sheep in any of those realms, I guess, on the whole. And it is one, because I'm not a clinical oriented psychologist. That's part of the question, questioning that can come in there. And I think, and I am into kink myself as well. So there's unfortunately, people still think that kink is pathological. In way too many cases, they believe that, just like people believed homosexuality was pathological in the 50s and such, So it was like, even if you were kind of benevolent, it was like, oh, these poor souls, they've been damaged somehow in their youth, and now we got to try and fix them.
And let's be clear there, you're saying people believe that, but we're really talking about therapists and mental health practitioners that believe that kink comes out of a trauma base.
Yes. it's fundamentalism in its worst form. In the helping professions, this fundamentalism has impeded the shifts and the changes. I mean, it is amazing that the DSM has backed off as much of what it had been trending towards recently. Somehow that's a miraculous almost, it seems to me. And I know there's been a hard fight by individuals such as I think Michael Aaron and others who pushed hard against making sadism and masochism or any of the paraphilias to be only that. They opened it up more, and that gives us a lot of leverage, I think, going forward to like, okay, it's not in the if you can say it's not in the DSM, at least in the terms of the clinical model, you've made half the battle right there. But then that's the moralism that is underpinning the psychological profession are still stuck in these kind of moralisms that can't be, we know what's normal, that can't be normal. It's not normal to me, so it's not normal.
So how would you encourage, a kinky person who gets that kind of judgment or shaming from a therapist? How would you encourage them to respond, to overcome that?
That's a good question. I think, well, first of all, learn how to screen your psychologist before you begin, and straight up, are you kink friendly? Are you aware? Do you have any kink education? What do you know about kink? Have you had any previous clients, etc.? If you're in the midst of a therapy with a therapist, and that issue comes up, and you can tell they're responding, have your own agency. Set your own boundaries, protect yourself, say stop. I'm in. This session has ended. We'll review further, but I'm not going to be shamed by your point of view, etc. Something, whatever. So, this is what the empowerment we talked at the beginning is about, is claiming your voice and advocacy of your sexual birthright, and this is what I try to teach my clients is be your own champion, get fierce. No, this is your sexuality. It is yours. Claim it and defend against anyone who's trying to tell you there's something wrong with you, So that's the first part. People really, to get over the shame, get empowered, become a champion, that will take care of the shame. I mean, you have to kind of take care of that. That part's not going to win the battle. The shamed part is weak. It's hurt. It's afraid, bring this part of you that can say, be proud of who you are, that knows that, I see, this is the paradox. People don't quite get the paradox, especially it's true in kink sexuality, is that, oh, I'm a dominant erotic sadist. How can I be a loving parent and a gentleman and be in service in the world and, go to the PTA meetings? Because we live in this monotheistic culture that thinks those are black and white, either or, good or evil. But the truth is, it's more like yin yang. It's like, I am a dominant erotic sadist. I like all of those kinky things that you can imagine that might imply. Yes, I do. And then, but also my intention is to be an honorable man, to be an honest man, to be a loving, generous, caring man, and to be an advocate and be strong in those ways. But the two are distinct, and they can learn to be held in a way that still is in honor with your agreements and your values and your responsibilities. So that's the key.
So standing up for yourself and accepting and embracing that, who you are, that includes those kinky, sexual aspects of yourself. Just because you have those aspects of yourself, that doesn't mean that's all that you are, but it is a part of yourself. And that as you stand up against shaming of that, you're standing up for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Sex has been the bastard of human personality for thousands of years now. And this is the era and the time to bring it up to the table along with intellect, creativity, spirit, and emotion as, it's a player, it's here with us. It's always been a part of us. And so this era, somehow it's really pushing to come into the light and out of the dark where it's been kept.
I agree. I think that, the internet, the ability to have
Mm,
private, communication and information and education and outreach to other people who share your interests. I think it's absolutely, unique in human history. And now
yeah.
so many people are finding out they're not the only ones with these desires, and there's nothing wrong with them for having these desires the way they've been taught. And
Mm,
it's now leading to people like you pushing back and saying, hey, um, this is who I am. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're going to shame me, then you need to back off and we're done here.
mm,
I like
yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
Galen, thank you so much. Where can people find you and your work?
Yeah. Well, I live in Portland, Oregon, and my website is galenfous.com, GALENFOUS.com. And most of all the information you'd want to know is about me
And
is
you,
on my site there.
and you have a book too, right?
Yes, I recently put out a book called Decoding Your Kink, a guide to share, enjoy, and explore your wildest sexual desires, which is kind of bringing a lot of what we talked about here, as well as the psychological, what I look at the psychological, mythic, erotic nature of kink from an archetypal, symbolic, mythic point of view. That model makes a lot of sense to me, and a lot of things fit together. I found with clients I work with, I go, oh, I see, it's something you can hold on to. So it's tangible information about these unconscious dimensions of our sexuality, and then how to hold them in an honorable way, shed shame, be empowered. All of that is going on there.
Fabulous. Thanks for the work you're doing, Galen.
That's a pleasure. You too, David.